Ladies and gentlemen, I am sitting here with the president, Mr. Qekema from AZAPO, and I want to hear and listen to him talk. I've seen and I've read most of his writing that he's been sharing, and I've actually been able to even follow on some video links and video clips that he's had. But I want the president of AZAPO to just tell us this name, Nelvis.
Thank you very much, Olwam, and the viewers at home. And it's surprising because my parents never went to school, so they were illiterate, so to speak. And while I was born in that area that is called the Sundays River Valley, and there's a small town there, a small dorpy called Kerkut. In fact, yes. In fact, the indigenous name is Enweba. It's called after the river, the Sundays River. The indigenous name is Enweba. So that's where I was born. And surprisingly, my name, and only name, I have no other name, and then given to me by people who are illiterate, and the name is Nelvis. And when I was growing up, I was wondering, what type of a name is this? And why am I called this? And then, but you respond because that's the name that you are given, and that you grew up being called that name. I am told, which is very funny for a black consciousness person like me. It's an irony, because I'm told the name was given to me by an aunt, and then apparently he was taking care of a young white infant, or young white boy, where she was working, and then apparently the boy's name was Neville. And again, just to indicate, the warmth of our people, the warmth of our mothers, the love, the genuine, the organic love that our mothers can give to anyone, whether it is their biological child or not, but that connection. So she had such connection with that white boy infant that she took that name and gave it to me, because she took that boy as her own biological child. And so the name was given to me, and the name was supposed to be Neville, as I was told. But because if you grow up in the villages, the name, gets processed and then changes from this and that, Melvin, Melvis, Nelvin, Melvin, until, there's something that was written down was Nelvis. So that's how I got to have the name.
Because I was thinking Elvis, Nelvis, Nelson, because there's similarities within
Yes.
at least the sounding of the names. But then now, President, we know you to be the president of AZAPO, and we understand that you have actually been even friends with the former, the late Peter Jones, whom I've actually met when I was a researcher at the CIPSET, Center for Integrated Postcode Education and Training. And then we went to Port St. John's this particular year. It should have been around 2015, 2016. And we met him and his programs that he was running along that region, Port St. John's. I want, in your own maybe way, just to reflect on the friends that you have made, like about Peter Jones in your youth, because 40 years of friendship must have been coming from your youth.
Indeed. Yes, I was very fortunate. I joined AZAPO, the Azanian People's Organization, at a very young age, and that was 1982 when I was brought into it. And remember, that was its formative stage, stages at that time. So it was being built, and the philosophy was being even evolving even further. So as a result of that, I have rubbed shoulders, with the pioneers of the Black consciousness movement. You know, I've had, even though they were older than me, my fathers, so to speak, my parents, so to speak, but they became friends to me. You know, I've served with these people, you know, Peter Jones, you've just named Professor Seth Cooper, Pandelani Nefolobotwe, Musibudi Mangena, who later became the international chairperson of the Black Conscious Movement of Azania in exile, and then our army in exile. So I've met all these guys. So as a result, I've been able to have been privy and access that type of information that is not written anywhere. You don't get it anywhere, but you get it from, you know, the founders. You get it from the pioneers, and then when they are sitting down and they're not worried about pressures of being, you know, in front of the camera, you know, just talking and all. So you tend to get everything. You even get the body language of the time. You even able to get the thinking behind the scenes, behind the time. You even get the kind of things they are embarrassed about. You know, they wish they wouldn't share about. They are able to bring to you Steve Biko in person. You know, the human, Steve Biko, the man, the human being. Not just the leader, beyond being a leader, but when you're a leader, you are a finished product, you know, accomplished, you look perfect. But they're able to bring to me the imperfect Steve Biko. So these are the kind of people I really interacted with.
1982, before you joined, what was life like for the president, for you?
Well, for me, before I joined AZAPO in 1982, you can go back to, I've lived in different localities or locations. And then, for instance, if you have, you talk about Enweba or Kerkut, that's your village, raw village type of life in the Karoo. And then, but I've also lived in the early 70s, you know, that was before I went to school. In this area now, that it was called Elos those days, where you find Motherwell. You know, that's where my maternal uncle were working in the ovens where they were baking, you know, bricks, you know, cooking bricks there. And that was the type of life. And there, if you go back to Kerkut, where I started, that's where I learned the value, the African cultural value of sharing. For instance, when we were younger, you know, no shoes at all. And then what do you call this type of things? Thorns, you know. So you have thorns all over the place, but you've got to trample on those thorns until you create your own footpath, you know, and then your feet, you know, hardened to be able to handle and adapt to your situation. And then you even grow those scales, your feet grows those scales where you have some grooves in between, you know. And then you would have thought, though, in fact, we never even paid attention to that, because we now learned later, no, that was important. It was nature, you know, developing to be able to adapt. So you needed to be rough and hardened so that you're able to withstand your rough circumstances. And those days, you know, I mean, for you to have lice and things and onomoi and those type of, you know, all those all over the show and all that. In fact, you had to remove your hair because you had that. And then you had even what you call those scales there. And then because sometimes even you don't have time, you're playing. When you try to clean your noses and you're trying to, and then you just pull it that way. And then you find that you have, so that was the type of life. And which is funny, that when you sleep, it's one open heart, and then you sleep together, and then they put blankets here, and it's your brothers, your cousins and everything, and you sleep together, about 5 or 6 of you here over here, and then you learn to sleep together. That's an important aspect of sharing. You grow up together. You come together, and that spiritual connection as you grow up, as children, you become one. And then sometimes we're wetting ourselves until we're older. So you get used to that because the blankets must be taken and then put out there.
Right.
But then even when you have to eat, the principle and the value of sharing, because if though you are 5 or 6, you eat together in one bowl, and so you're given you've got to eat, and you learn to eat in one bowl, and sometimes there would be difficulties because there are the guys who are very skilled and they were able to go. The food is hot. You throw one spoon after another, and remember, if you are the last remaining on the dish, and then you must go and wash the dishes. So you must go, and then you realize this guy is 2 spoons ahead. So you got to rush, you got to rush, you got to rush. Up until sometimes they even develop the aspect of saying, you want to eat with 1 spoon. So that there is no such destructive competition, so that you're able, all of you, to survive. So you are 5, and then you're given 1 spoon, you eat, and then you pass, you eat. So you learn, the principle of sharing. So you learn that principle, which hits you when you go and watch the elderly people sitting. Remember, when you are here on this dish, you are different ages. You are eating in one bowl, but you're different ages. And you say, what is this about? But when you go out there, you go to the kraal, maybe there's a traditional or cultural ceremony, you find the same principle, sharing. These people sit together in regiments, but in one place, so that these ones, the younger ones, are able to learn from that. And you learn from that, you get leadership. And that's why in the rural areas you find that young people already, boys, you speak like the old men. So you get the principle. You eat in one place, all of you, the same principle of sharing. So I'm saying that's that. And then you move from there. And then because my mother had to go and find work in Port Elizabeth here in Quebec, live there. Fortunately, she was armed with Afrikaans, because we're in those type of areas, we live together with the so-called colored people, so the Afrikaans was there. So when she comes here, she takes me to my uncle in Alos. Alos is a different type of situation. It's not rural. That's where you find people and stepping one another. Every Friday, people are stepping, and people are jiving. There are taverns, those type of people. It's an extremely, extremely rough area. So I know all those environments.
And then I'm trying to really quickly pass by at least the 80s. As far as Port Elizabeth is concerned, there was these boycotts, economic boycotts. There was a lot of political activities. And now learning that AZAPO, also's first branch, even though there were struggles to actually formalize it, was established during those periods. All the way through to 1994, what was happening in AZAPO?
Well, I've now left Enweba, Kerkut, I've now left Alos, and I'm now in KwaZakele, because then my mother was able to get herself a house in KwaZakele in 1973. So we now move into that area. And then that's where now as a young person, the same principle of sharing. And then you wake up in the morning, and all of you go and stand in a corner for the sun, the morning sun, and then your elder brothers and then you get the stories. The same principle of sharing, the same principle of the togetherness. Yes. But then again, that's where you also learn to play dice and things and whatever, and to be streetwise. And then all of you throw the money on the ground. The money is up together, but you must know where to get your money when you get your prize. Then that's when I get recruited into AZAPO in 1982. When I get recruited into AZAPO, it was very funny because it was highly secretive, this type of thing, highly secretive, because AZAPO were looking for the enlightened people, and they were doing this underground so that it must not be nipped in the bud before it gains traction. Yes. So some of us were then identified as a clever boy and whatever, and then because I was told I was quite sharp at school. So that's how I got recruited into AZAPO, and then we then started as sales in AZAPO, because they started with political sales in around 1982. then having a political education. That was the most important thing in AZAPO. Every time we move into political cells, secret kind of, and then political education, there are papers that are being read, and sometimes you are asked that, last week we discussed something, a particular paper, can you help us recap? You are still new. You've got to recap what was discussed last week, and then, and sometimes you're still sitting there listening, and you're still new, and says, sorry, what do you think when I tell? You know, so you've got to be on your feet. You learn to be on your feet, and sometimes you go out there, and then they say and then says, Comrade, can you stand up and say something and address, just introduce this topic. So you've got to learn to be on your feet. It's like you are a soldier, the way soldiers are trained. You're not really prepared. You are prepared on the ground. Yes. You learn as you go. And so when we started with AZAPO, and then around towards the late 1982, then when we felt we were okay now, under the leadership of Ngobonguna, we then started going into town hall type of meetings, small dagu, small centenary, and we would go there, and then people would come and then would explain to people what this concept about. So that's how things came about. As a result, AZAPO became so appealing to the people, first intellectually, number two philosophically, because it was able to explain little things that you thought this is simple. And then you see somebody poor and you think that's what it is, but AZAPO is able to explain why that person is in that condition, and why that person should not have been in that condition, and why that person should not despair, but that person should be able to use his or her hardship and miseries as an agent of change.
Okay, and then President, with all this insular and internal work that is happening within AZAPO, sorry, I'm familiar with AZAPO because I was at university at the time where also AZAPO was quite prominent in Nelson Mandela University, but I need to understand what happened before or during 1994 that AZAPO did not necessarily sort of gain into that traction. IFP was able to articulate into the new democratic dispensation with its own challenges. Even the Buddha organizations were also able to do that, and the evolution of some other entities that culminated into even DA currently as from 2000. What has been the issue with AZAPO that it did not, or seemingly from my perspective, we've seemed to have lost it over the time?
Yes. No, absolutely. Remember, the ANC PAC banned in 1960, yes. And after that for about a decade, and then they say there is a political lull in the country, yes. And up until the emergence of Steve Biko and his comrades, teenagers and in their 20s, in around 1967, they crop up, and then they reignite the flames of the revolution, and then they start the struggle all over again. You know, and so things go fast and everything, and they establish organization, and that culminates into the Soweto uprising, the June 16 uprising in 1976, the effectiveness of the Black consciousness philosophy and the Black consciousness movement at that time, and then under young people, the militancy, the radicalism, and then 1977. The organizations are banned, all the BC and Black Conscious organization banned, Steve Biko, the foremost leader, killed, right? And then 6 months later, you know, the Black Consciousness movement say, what do we do? Are we going to mimic the ANC and then fight for unban, PPC, unban? Who says, no, we're not going to do that. 6 months later after the 19 October banning, and then immediately AZAPO is formed. And AZAPO is formed as a institutional continuation of the banned organization, and formed by the same comrades who were you know, in BBC, SASO, you name them. You know, and then so AZAPO then becomes an institutional heir of the BPC and Steve Biko legacy. So therefore, AZAPO then becomes an institutional reconstitution, you know, of the band organization, you know, and then it continue in these forms and form all the other organizations that were banned. It replicates them beyond the banning time of 1977. But then AZAPO immediately flies again. It flies again. It flourishes throughout you know, or Azania or South Africa, as other people know it. But then, what then happens? Remember, AZAPO was able to fly also because it didn't have many competitors. It was the leading organization, the only organization in the country, the only, you know, visible and leader of society in the country. It is up until 1983 when the ANC re-emerges inside the country as the United Democratic Front, the UDF. That's when then AZAPO starts to come under pressure, because there's now real and practical and a fierce competition which is presented by the UDF, to an extent that competition and fighting for space, territorial, then culminates in what was called the feud in 1985-1986, where now there was political infighting amongst this organization, and the necklaces, burning of homes and whatever. And but then AZAPO holds on. AZAPO holds on. And AZAPO is struggling also in terms of resources at that point in time, because AZAPO is so principled that it refuses to take blood money. AZAPO, it refuses to take money from the capitalists for its own survival and funding. And then that makes it poor. But then, to where you are now, and then in 1991, there was a Makino poll which said in 1991, if elections were to be conducted at that point in time, AZAPO would so challenge the ANC that it would either come close to neck and neck or number 2 to the ANC at that point in time. Then come 1994, then AZAPO was not happy about that arrangement, because what was happening, you would remember that the Boers made it a point that the constitution was drafted under the apartheid government and then was adopted in 1993 by the apartheid parliament. So then the constitution that was used by democracy, it was a constitution that was Baptist and accepted by the apartheid parliament. Now you can understand, if anything that the white minority would accept, it would nothing that would extend democracy to the majority of black people, extend the wealth to the majority of black people, extend livelihood to the majority of black people. That's why you find this situation. As a result, AZAPO then boycotted the 1994 elections, because AZAPO was saying no. These 1994 are a continuation of the slavery of black people. There is no land in these 1994 elections. There is no new constitution in these 1994 elections. So therefore, AZAPO would not agree to co-manage black slavery, to co-manage, black poverty, under the tutelage, of white supremacy. As a result of that AZAPO boycotted the elections and then withdrew. So that's why you find AZAPO in this situation. Well, we are proud that we stood for the principle, but standing for the principle made us poor. It made us to lose electoral ground, democratic ground. It made us to lose resources, lose out on resources and the experience and the cameras and everything, so that by the time we decided to contest elections in 1999, we were now chasing the action. chasing the action. And that is why AZAPO is still chasing the action till today, because we had to pay for our embracing and clinging onto the principles of the liberation struggle. Are we bitter about it? No, we are not. We are proud that we had to suffer for the principles we believe in.
That is helpful to get a broader understanding of what has been happening, even your critical response, because really that would have been my next question, whether now when you look back, do you feel proud? You've just answered that. But then again, we are back to this question of who funds politics in South Africa. In any democracy, who should fund a political party in a democratic dispensation anywhere in the world? What is a principled position, especially when the majority of the people remain poor? In a political environment that requires you to send people across the ends of the country in all the municipalities and sustain them in hotels and sustain them giving food and all the traveling that needs to be done. Who funds that? How should that be done? And maybe this could be a reflection on the current conversation on the funding of political machinery.
There is the fundamental and critical criticism, of the electoral democracy by AZAPO. Because we are saying, remember, that in electoral democracy, money speaks. There is a terrible situation where the elections themselves, or you can talk about the concept of the financialization, of politics and electoral democracy. So it's monetization that takes place. So it's money that speaks. It's not the truth. It's not your hard work that speaks. No, it is money that speaks. It is not the people who decide who must lead them. It is the money that chooses who will be the leader of the people. And how does that happen? That happens because the people who've got the money, who own the money, who own the wealth of the country, who own the minerals of the country and everything of the country, they are the people who own the media itself, the instruments of the freedom of expression. The media itself, they own it. So in other words, they decide who will be listened to. They decide who will be seen, who will be heard. They decide that through the media they own. So you may be having your most accurate truth, but if they decide you will not be heard, you will not be seen, you will not be listened to, nobody will know about you. So that's a problem. Money speaks. And again, it doesn't end there. When again you've got to go to campaigning and all those type of things, you find again that money speaks again. Why is that so? In this country, the fundamentals of the economy of this country is still in apartheid terms. In other words, the economy and the wealth of this country is still owned by about 10% of the population. And that is the white population, the white minority. And it is a fact that about 98% of the economy is owned by white people, by these families. Right? And so you find that black people are only fighting over the crumbs that are left in the economy, that are left in the wealth, about 2% of that, and those are the spaza shops really. And then your Ramaphosa and all other people really are getting the crumbs that fall from the bigger table of white wealth, of the white ruling class. And all that they get is they fight within that 2%. As a result of that, so the people, look at now, go and check your books from the IEC, you will see that all these organizations, the ANC, Action SA, BOSA, even the new ones and all of them, DA and all of that, they are funded by the same families, white families. It's the Rupert family, it's the Oppenheimer family, and they choose which one they fund more so that it has more voice than the others. In other words, in that sense, you know, it is not the people that choose who their leaders will be. It is the white ruling class which owns the wealth of this country, who chooses who will be the leaders of the people. And therefore, what am I telling you? I am telling you that the democracy of this country is distorted. I'm telling you that the democracy of this country is half-cooked, it's half-developed. I'm telling you that the growth of the democracy of this country is stunted, is retarded, because we are still where apartheid wants us. Apartheid is still controlling democracy. Apartheid is still ruling democracy. Apartheid is still dictating to democracy what democracy must do. But then apartheid is nowhere to be seen because apartheid is hiding behind democracy. Democracy is put in front of the people as a buffer. Is the people the side who are poor? Is democracy in front as if this is what works? And then behind the actual rulers, apartheid is there behind. So that's why we are saying, even if you look at your results, look at them, there's a correlation between the monetary input and the results of the elections. If you have $1 billion, I mean, look at the ANC. Look at the ANC. ANC. It's not the country's election. It's the ANC Congress deciding who must be the president. And they spent more than $1 billion. The guy who campaigns to be the president of the ANC is given by all these white families, the white ruling class, the white monopoly, is given more than $1 billion to contest to be the leader of and that person wins. And when that person wins, we also learn that those families that have given this guy more than $1 billion are also getting, you know, tenders and contracts from government. They're getting business from government. Can you see the corruption? When you go to court, we want to see who gave this guy more than $1 billion, and then the court says, no, you can't see, they seal it. So in other words, we are telling you that's what it is. Money speaks. So even in this election, in other words, there is no will of the people in the South African democracy, but it is the will of the wealth, will of the money, which is controlled by the white ruling class. Therefore, it is the will of the white ruling class.
Thank you so much for that response. The question stands, now that you know that, and now that AZAPO needs to articulate into these kind of politics, unless it does, or unless it plans a revolution, it means that there's no way that you can amass the equivalent of the monies you've just mentioned, whether true or false. It means that now that I know, I've not seen any plans, or are there any plans for AZAPO to raise such amount of monies? Yes. Because I think there would be a point where AZAPO decides to move from the politics of liberation movement and telling the truth and standing for what happened in the past and what needs to happen, to a point where they need to play into the political game. And that means, to some extent, making a decision of whether do we stand and speak the truth and hope to win votes, or do we now enter the political fray into how either the organization is funded. What is your response on that?
So what we are saying as AZAPO is that the fact of the matter is that we are where we are. What is supreme at this point in time is electoral politics. So we've gone beyond armed struggle and all the other things. Now there is some peace space that is available. So we need to use that peaceful space. So anything other than that, going to the bush, going to the mountains is not going to work, you know. So in other words, AZAPO is saying, we don't want any pity. We don't want any favors. We will go to the unfavorable ground. We'll go to the unfavorable ground, and then we will adapt there under the hardships, under the predicaments, under the impossibilities, and then we will turn those impossibilities into possibilities for our people. In other words, AZAPO will get in there and will fight within in accordance with the rules, but we will find space within those rules, because any rules, whatever, it doesn't matter how difficult it is, but you will always find space within and technically for you to be able to turn this thing around in favor of the people. We have done it, haven't we? Because there is democracy today, because we were able to fight the tanks of the apartheid regime. We were able to fight the tear gas, the bullets, and everything. We were able to fight their poverty. We were able to fight them denying us water, food, and then shelter and homes. But we were able to wage the struggle such that today we have democracy. So we are then saying as AZAPO, we'll find space in there. And then once we find that space without money, we'll go and do it. Now, but we are saying our first choice as AZAPO would have been a situation where the liberation movement comes together. AZAPO, the PAC, and ANC. These three come together because we are the people who fought for this liberation, who fought for this democracy, and we delivered it to the people. Once we delivered it to the people, these three organizations, then start kicking, each other or one another out of the democratic space. And we say that should not be like that. Instead of us competing destructively against one another, trying to eliminate one another as the liberation movement, we were supposed to come together and say, okay, there's an unfavorable constitution, unfavorable wealth distribution in the country, all the type of things you can talk about. But now we are now the liberation movement. Why don't we close the ranks as the liberation movement? The three, components of the liberation movement, and we say, can we come together? Can we make things favorable to ourselves and the people? Can we work towards implementing a minimum political program of liberation and development in favor of the people? And then let's forget about where we differ, but let's come where we come together, the common purpose. And then we move in there, and then we say, can we now also recruit the newer organization into democracy and then get them into this fold, a national liberation front? And then we say, can we work together towards changing this constitution, overhauling this constitution, which makes development for the people difficult, which makes the restoration of the humanity and dignity of black people possible? Can we? That has not happened. So where we are right now, we're saying it looks like the ANC is happy where it is, swimming, getting lost with the current, but we are saying, as AZAPO, will be the voice of reason, organize other political forces, because we believe we're not going to do it together. We're going to do it with others as a front. Once we do that, we build that critical mass. We build that critical mass until we're able to use that muscle, in favor of the people, and we believe we can do that.
And then, how then now does AZAPO take the Steve Biko legacy and component into the future? Knowing very well that the emerging younger political voices, whether it be on campuses, academic institutions, or in the streets, they are starting to evoke, they have for a while now, to evoke such strong names of Steve Biko and Professor Grafrinet.
Sobukwe.
Sobukwe, sorry, I just forgot the professor's name. Oh, you know,
Mangaliso Sobukwe.
yes. So how then, how do we take those legacies of Mangaliso Sobukwe, of Steve Biko, into the political future of the country? And would that need money? And how do we raise the question of money? I hope you hear what I'm trying to ask and to get to the practicality of the use of resources.
Yes, yes.
Even in trying to resuscitate and to not even to resuscitate, to uphold organizational heritage.
Yes, yes. Now I'm with you there. Remember, in AZAPO, we believe Biko lives. In other words, his spirit lives and is still with us and is still highly influential. Remember, Steve Biko would have been forgotten in this country, but had it not been for the efforts of AZAPO, which made it a point that we commemorate the man and the legacy till this day. And that's why Steve Biko, has all been emboldened to live even, further and much more actively.
And that's the work you do with the Cadre at Nelson Mandela University.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah. And now, take for instance, to show that Steve Biko lives, the Fees Must Fall movement, those are young people, they were born, into or this side of democracy. They were not there. They never met the man. They've never seen, never heard about him. But they were able to embrace, his teachings, his principles, his values, his militancy. They were able to learn, from him. Because remember, Steve Biko is their age. Steve Biko started changing the world as a teenager from the rural areas. Steve Biko started changing and leading the world and meeting world leaders, senators from America in his 20s. Steve Biko, led this country into, the June 16 uprising. He was 29. Only 29, being able to be the political overall influence that erupts the nation, into action and then face bullets, and only armed with, dustbin lids, and then stones, facing tanks. So he was able, to ignite the fires in the bosom of the nation at only 29 and then with 1976. And then we're still looking at him at 30, at the age of 30. That's a child. Come on, that's a child. It's a young person. He died as a toddler, if you like. As a toddler at the age of 30. Even though people think he was this old man, he was a toddler, an infant when he died at the age of 30. Yet he had the mind and he had the vision of a 90 years old. So therefore, the Fees Must Fall people were able to go to their own young people. Remember, that's their peers in terms of, political activism, political experience. Steve Biko is their peer. That's why it was easier for them to embrace and mimic Steve Biko, because they can understand him, because they can identify with him, and they can identify with him physically, spiritually, even in terms of soul. Because here is a man who understood spoke their language that they can understand. He walked and smiled and slept and ran exactly the same way they do. And that is why, therefore, Steve Biko is still alive today. And that's why AZAPO is saying our role, therefore, as the Black Consciousness Movement, under the leadership of AZAPO, is to mainstream the Black Consciousness philosophy, because we don't believe there is any other, legacy we are left with. You know, you have Pan-Africanism, you have black consciousness, and it's one and the same thing to me and many of us. Now you have black consciousness, mainstream it. Black consciousness must be taken to the academia in our universities. It must be taken to sports. It must be taken into, the faith, the church, mosques and all of them. Black consciousness must be taken into the streets. Black consciousness must be taken into the villages, into the townships. Black consciousness must be taken into the oceans. It must be taken into the skies. It must be taken onto the land and underneath the land, into the minerals. Black consciousness must be ubiquitous. It must be everywhere. Black consciousness must rule the spirit of the black consciousness, because black consciousness is one and the same, and the black conditions, it understands it. So therefore you cannot have the physicality of the black condition, but you do not have the spirit of the black condition, which is black consciousness. Once you separate the two, the black person on this earth will be lost. And that's why we're saying through the spirit, because the spirit lives, through the sheer determination of the people, we will make it happen.
Isn't that a philosophical, intellectual work as opposed to a political project? Because there seems, and valid, there seems to be quite a charge when you address the question of black consciousness as a philosophy in all the spheres that you just mentioned. And the academy is also, there's a professor, More, he's now in the States, who writes about Steve Biko as the Africana philosopher, the existential Africana philosopher. And his work is catching traction. And not just him, a lot of other people are starting to write about Steve Biko as a necessary philosophy that emanates from South Africa directly, which we can't point at any other philosophy in the same consistency, in the same view as about Plato and Hegel and all the other philosophers in the European context. That now here is a legacy of philosophy, at least the seeds of philosophy that could be taken into all the fields and the areas and the phases and the stages that you've mentioned. However, it's only institutional organization or machinery seeks to participate in politics, which politics doesn't seem to be a favorable condition for its own existence into the future.
That's right. Remember what distinguishes AZAPO from other political organizations or political parties is that others have got all these things you can talk about, tactics and strategies. They have political programs. We have those too as AZAPO. But what we have as AZAPO, more than what all of them have, is that we have a philosophy. We have a philosophy, a world outlook, which informs our strategy, principles, values, and mission. We have a philosophy as our foundation, which is the determinants of our actions. That's what distinguishes us. In other words, other organizations, they have the bow, but they don't have the arrow. They have the gun, but they don't have the bullet. And AZAPO have both. The bow and the arrow, the bullet and the gun. And that's why we can be effective. But then, come to the issues of resources. Remember, there are different types of resources. And there are resources that are primary. The resources without which you cannot get the other resources. For you to be able to get the financial, material resources, you need the primary resource. And that primary resource is the human resource. In fact, with the human resource, you can go a distance even without the financial and the material resource. Because then the human resource has the intellectual resource as well. and then that can keep you together. And that's why the people in Palestine, even when they are facing extermination as a people, when they are facing ethnic cleansing, genocide, you know, but they can still say, no, we believe in what we don't want to change. You may deny us water, electricity, homes, and life, dignity, and humanity, but we know who we are. Self-recognition, self-definition, we are who we are, self-determination. We know where we're going, and we will be who we are. So in that sense, therefore, you know, once we, as a people in AZAPO, we believe if you do not have money now, the financial resources, but go to the primary resources, and the primary resources are the people. Once you have the people on your side, you know, you will be able to defeat, you know, a high-tech warfare, you know, like helicopters, like tanks, like R5s, and you name them. You know, you will be able to defeat those. So if you have the human resource on your side, but unfortunately, for you to be able, you know, to weaponize this human resource positively in the direction of liberating the people, liberating themselves, then you need to conscientize them. You need to educate them so that they understand, you know, what they will as a people, the power they have in themselves, the black power we are talking about. Because people make a mistake of thinking power is only a state power, you know. It's not only state power that is power. In fact, the fundamental power is the people's power, the black power. So if as AZAPO we target that power, that pocket of power, which is fundamental, you know, we get into the people, get into the villages, as they're going to the moon, as Nyerere says, we go to the village, we go to the hearts of the people, and then we dwell in the hearts of the people, in the communities, in the villages, and then we turn that into a resource that will attract the other resources. Then we believe we'll be getting somewhere. Because right now, if we think we will never do struggle until we have 1 billion, we might as well forget, because we don't have that. That is within, you know, the closed echelons of Oppenheimer and the Ruperts, the white ruling class. So we'll not get there. That is not our struggle. Money is not our struggle. Get out of there. Get out of there. Your resource, your refuge, your hope is the people. Your resource is the people. Go to the human resource and use the intellectual resource to undermine the financial resources and the material resources in the beginning until you are able to, you know, draw them to you. But all I'm saying to you is that it's not philosophical. In everywhere in the world, that's why you got people who had nothing. That's why you had the Vietnamese people, you know, I mean, defeating a world superpower, America. You heard it, it happened. It happened. It's not a joke, it's not philosophy. I'm not dreaming. I'm telling you, you know, revolutionary reality.
And then we now running out of town, but what is your then reflection on the question of cadre deployment? Because after all the fights and the struggle you would have waged, surely you want to put comrades or towers that can actually implement the policies of which you've waged the war for.
Well, we can't really say we understand what cadre development is all about. But what we understand even more and sharper as AZAPO is the conflation of party and state, such that this becomes one. When you talk ANC, you talk the state. When you talk the state, you talk the ANC. When there is turbulence or disruptions in the ANC, and that equates to disruptions in the state because of the conflation, because you have fused the two, you have made them one. And then as AZAPO, we are saying, no, do not make this to be one. Separate these two, such that do not, when you employ somebody to be a commissioner of police, that person must be an ANC person. When you employ a CEO of a company, it must be an ANC person. When you employ a vice chancellor of universities, it must be an ANC person. You know, the SOEs and the NORA, it must be an ANC person. Even when you employ a SAFA leader, sports, it must be an ANC leader. Because you are misleading the community. Because the state belongs to the people as a whole. Whereas the ANC belongs to its few members and fewer members. So they separate the two. You do not have everything and then the best minds located and locked and imprisoned in the ANC, but you will get those all over society. And that is why, because of this conflation of the state and the party, you find that every street in the country is named after one person who must have been a leader of the ANC. Even universities are named after the leaders of the ANC. Others have not even gone to school, you know, and then you find their names, on the necks and the heads of universities. And Steve Biko himself, who was a student of UNISA, where is he in UNISA? Nowhere. He was a student of University of KwaZulu-Natal. Where is he there? He is nowhere. But there is a library in the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which is named after Mandela. Are we bitter? No, we like that. That's marvelous. But can't you name the university after Steve Biko, a student of that university at least? Can't you? You know. So
is that your suggestion? Is that something that you would have written, a formal, proposal to the powers that be for the university to change its name to Steve Biko?
Yes, we have done that. And then we're engaging on these issues. And remember, because of this type of thinking, this rotten thinking that this country is ANC, it's a country of ANC, these are the universities of ANC, this is the land of the ANC, these are the people of the ANC. If you're not ANC, you're not going to benefit, you're not going to play a contribution, you will be locked out. For instance, we've made a call that and we've even protested and written even to the mayor of Makanda and saying, this is the street where Steve Biko was arrested in Grahamstown. And this is the genesis of Matayadom, because this is this spot in Makanda, and just 1 kilometer from the settlers' monument across. Steve Biko was, stopped here at a roadblock, and then he was arrested here, and then later he died. And this is the genesis of Matayadom. Why don't you do a people's monument here to undermine the colonial monument which you are making the face of Makanda? Why don't you build history here? Because there is history that this colonial monument is literally overlooking and undermining, because here lies, and then the spirit of a man was taken from here, and that spirit is still here. Why don't you promote this sport, build a monument, name the street after Steve Biko? They refuse still today. And we are saying, who is Ginsberg? Who is Gins, whoever bag, who have mountains or whatever, a village in that place where Steve Biko, grew up and did his struggle? Why don't you name Ginsberg after, because Kona is okay, we accept Kona, because there's no king of Britain who's Williams, who have a town here, Queenstown. What nonsense is that? But why don't you name Ginsberg after Steve Biko? It can be Biko village or Biko, whatever the state may be. But why don't you recognize, remove this Ginsberg? Who is Ginsberg? So these are the kind of things that we're talking about. So back to that, we're saying we're unable to raise these issues because of the conflation of state. And as a result, when people employ, they employ only the people who are members of the ruling party because they do not see any other, because for them, it's only, this is the country of the ruling party, and it is not. This is the country of our forebears. This is a country of black people. Did I say that? Did you hear that? This is a country of black people, and I'm not flinching when I'm saying it. And I'm saying because I'm black and I'm proud. This is a country of black people. Before it becomes a country of whoever who lives in it, it is a country of black people, and everyone else who comes and live in this country must live in accordance with the terms laid down by the people of this country in terms of their forebears.
President, masibulele kakhulu ngexesha lakho and your input on this conversation. I want to give you just maybe 2 minutes of conclusion now that you heard what we talked about. If you want to address anything or maybe encourage people to vote for the election, anything in the next 2 minutes, just to close.
Yes,
you can look directly.
Yes, I would want to talk to women and young people in particular, because women are the backbone of society. They're the backbone of their community. They're the backbone of their homes. If it be said that men are the head, they are the backbone, and the head is nothing without the backbone. They are the backbone of the society. They are not only the majority, but they are the people who make things happen. They are the spiritual, energy that keeps this nation and these people together. It is about time that people say to themselves, they must not only be the numerical majority, but they must also be the power and powerful majority. They must also be the governance majority. They must also be the people who make things happen at the forefront of things. Not in the background, but at the forefront. We want to see women, and they have it in themselves to do so. Young people, we are saying, you are not only going to complain that remove those people who want to get there. No. Hasn't it been said that you are the ones you've been waiting for? You are the ones you've been waiting for. Steve Biko asked nobody to do anything for himself. He did it for himself. When he arrived as a young people, as a teenager, he led the struggles. He led the nations. He was in the forefront as a young person. He died young at the age of 30. At the age of 30. Because why? He was the one he himself was waiting for. And then when he arrived, he led. The young people of this country must rise and lead. They must not be going up and about and begging for Wi-Fi, begging for peace jobs, and begging to be accommodated into some jobs created by elderly people. They must make those things happen. And they have the power in themselves because the future is theirs. And that future, they must not surrender it to other people. They must not surrender the creation of that future of theirs to other people. They must be the one who set up and put up the foundation of their own future. The young people must rise and make it happen. They have themselves, nobody else, to make it happen.
In the president's own mouth and words, President Nelvis Qekema has just concluded for us this conversation with AZAPO and the conversation and the input, Steve Biko, that we've actually also been re-inspired by by this generation and those that come after us. Thank you so much, President, for coming, and hopefully we're going to have another conversation also as we come closer to the electoral date. Yes. And reflect on the progress thus far. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.